All right. Let's go. Let's go. Let's do this thing. What's up? If you're watching later, you know the deal. You might want to fast forward to the intro. Maybe it's your first time here. You don't know that I have to go to YouTube manually and get the link and tweet it and send it to Telegram and do all the lovely things that I do. And I enjoy. I do enjoy it. It's a little unprofessional, me getting links and editing tweets live, but you know, I kind of like that. I kind of like the feel of that. So hold on one second. I'm going to paste the YouTube link in here, and oh, the tweet is way too long. I have to remove 8 characters. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. I abbreviated it to what I've been reading. I think that imparts a nice linguistic flavor, but people will think it's a typo. Good thing I don't care what people think. Oh, I need the picture. Almost tweeted it without the picture. Imagine. Imagine. God. I would just have to hang it all up. If I tweeted it without the picture. If you're here in the chat, hold on one second. I'll be right there. Boom. It's been tweeted. Boom. I'm going to send the tweet to Telegram. And then we're good to go. We're starting a minute late, but not really. It's 6:55. I like starting like crazy early. And then it truly is a pre-show. But what are you going to do? Okay, I'm going to send this to Telegram really quick. I locked my dog out of the studio and I can hear her sniffing under the door. It's so sad. What a sad life. What a sad life she lives. Okay, send it to Telegram. Boom. We're good to go. How's it going, everybody? We have one person here. Kay Stockton Leal. What's up, man? How's it going? Okay, I just want to make sure this is good to go. Sorry, normally there's not this much tech finagling in the front. Yeah, we're good to go. Cool. All right, I'm going to throw some gloves on, move some tools around, and we're good to go. Normally, I guess we talk about me in the beginning. I got a lot of stuff on my mind. Painting-wise, theology-wise, weird, mystical stuff-wise. But I guess normally in the pre-show we talk about me. What's been going on with me? I secured a new domicile. I secured a new pad, as they say in the 70s. I secured a new pad. So that's been insane. I've been struggling to get any work done. It's nuts. I'm still a workaholic, but now I can't work all the time. So I guess that's kind of like being an alcoholic, but you can't drink all the time. Doesn't really sound like a fun time, does it? But it's cool. I've just been like driving all over, signing papers, moving stuff around. Anything fun, anything exciting in that department? Not really. Not really. Okay, I just want to make sure I have everything moved around here. Cool. I just want to be able to see what I'm doing here. Otherwise, I've been reading a ton. We're going to talk about that. Let's see. What's a good anecdote I can tell you guys while I'm getting this going right now? Oh, here's a good one. I am deciding what colors to paint the new spot that I've moved into. And it's pretty fun because I am feeling the tension between wanting to obviously paint it the most insane colors imaginable, while also knowing that then I would immediately really regret that. So kind of been compromising with reality a little bit. I have to paint the studio, so the whole point, the whole point of moving, obviously, is just to secure a better art space. It's kind of crazy if you think about it. I came this far, however far this is, whatever metric we're using. I'm just in this tiny room. I even have carpet in here, so like every time I paint, I'm worried about like destroying the carpet. But now I have like a much bigger space, and I can kind of do whatever I want. So it's gonna be pretty awesome. And I'm gonna paint the studio there And I really want to paint it a color because I like the idea of like stepping into the room and you know there's like a symbolic like color on the walls, like maybe it's gray and I give it a name like, you know, the Stone Cavern or something, or maybe I paint it like Venetian red and call it like the Pompeii room or something, like whatever. But I know I'm going to regret any color that I choose, so I'm kind of like coping really hard. Like maybe I can use like an off-white or something cool, but I'm probably just going to paint the whole thing white. There's actually a section in Da Vinci's notebooks where he talks about setting up a painting studio. And he talks about, you know, what color to paint the walls, where you should have the windows, what time of day, and all this stuff. It's pretty cool. So he would probably slap me for even considering a dark color, but what are you going to do? It's also funny going shopping for painting colors because you'd think that my color attunement is very high. You'd think, you know, running this extremely legitimate painting show, doing art, printing, all this stuff that I do, that my color senses would be impeccable walking into the Home Depot or Lowe's, but they're really not. And actually, I find myself way too clouded by the names of the colors. I kind of just want to pick the colors based on the names. I guess that's like the classic joke about painting your house and like getting paint chips and samples. But I saw this color called Ghost Pines. It's like, that's awesome. I saw a color called, like, it was something called like Inside the Oyster. I guess that's way too many characters for a paint name, but it was something like that. And I was like, dude, that's legit. That's perfect. So my wife keeps having to talk me out of these like absolutely insane decisions that I'm making based purely on the name of stuff. The one color that I can roll with, this is color theory. We're not just blogging about my life right now. This is color theory as applied. We call this practical color theory. The one color that I can roll with is the kitchen is yellow, and that's actually really awesome. The yellow really suits like the kitchen. And I feel like the one color you can really get away with in a house, at least for me, without people kind of noticing that it's a strong color. It's a strong color, but it's not so strong that someone would walk into a room and say, whoa, it's really X color in here. You know, you want it to fly under the radar a little bit. Is, I guess, what I would call green tea color. Like if you've seen matcha or like green tea like that, you can paint a room that color and get away with it, so I'm pushing for that. I might do that. That's the most exciting thing going on with me. Otherwise, I had to measure the whole house and like determine all the painting angles and square footage and stuff like that. It's actually the last anecdote I'll use, and then we'll get this going. I didn't really plan out the pre-show because I planned out what I actually wanted to talk to you about, right? Go figure. But I thought this was interesting and actually kind of relevant to the show. I'm just going to grab this printed piece of paper off the floor. So it's interesting because I was measuring with my friend, right? So probably it's kind of obvious, but if you measure a room, you know, and it's 10 by 10, let's make it easy, it's a 10 by 10 room, you say, oh, it's 100 square feet on the walls. But the thing is, there's, you know, a heater and windows and 2 doors, and the doors are different sizes. So obviously you have to subtract that, right, from the square footage on the walls. And then it gets really complicated if you imagine, you know, a room in your house that has counters and a big pantry, or, you know, maybe you just have an island and it's attached to the wall in one spot. So all of a sudden you have like 20 different variables you have to subtract from the walls. And I was with my friend, and he was drawing diagrams like this, which I guess is how you would draw them, right, normally. So right, your room, you know, it's 7 by 5. It's a really small room, but whatever. And he's like, oh, we got this thing here. But then it got really complicated because let's say you have, what are they called? Like cabinets and then a counter, and you have the space in between you have to paint. So he's making these drawings, you know, trying to like fit it in, and it's not really making any sense. So it was interesting because I was doing drawings and he was doing drawings, right? And he was drawing it this way. And then when we came over and looked at my notebook, my intuition was to draw it like this. And I thought this was just an interesting kind of like visual thinking thing. You know, we talk so much about visuals and how they affect thinking and information and how information relates to visuals on the show. But I was drawing like this. I was drawing it in 3D. I guess I'm an artist, so I'm not like making fun of him or whatever. But, you know, and then it's way easier because you can put the door in, you know. And I was writing in, oh, the door is like 7 by, I'm just making up numbers here. And then we have the counter, you know, this is 3, this is 11 feet, and then there's this over here, and maybe this is 6, you know, whatever, I'm just making stuff up. And I just thought it was interesting because I compared our drawings in at the end, and it was like, oh yeah, like I've been doing art for so long, my natural inclination is to think in terms of 3D. And I could even put stuff over here on this wall, You know, I could just drop it in and say, oh, there's this window over here. You know, perfect. You can even see that 3x4 over here. So I thought that was kind of interesting. There was something about it. You know, I couldn't really parse it out. I mean, obviously someone who's not trained in visual art and like rendering information in two-dimensional form would go for this route. But I thought it was interesting just because, you know, the way that you map information, we always think of it as like, oh, there's only one way to do it, but there's actually like a trillion different ways to do it. So it got me thinking. I was like sitting at my desk and I was like, well, you know, how many ways could you map out the way to paint the room? And I was thinking, you know, you could even do it like this. You could have the floor on the bottom and then have the walls like folded out, sort of like you're looking top down, you know, into the room, right? And then you'd have like the door over here. This is actually probably the best way to do it. This is better than the way I came up with, actually. And you could have the window over here, and you can measure it all out and still show like the counters and the drawers. And I was laying in bed, and this is the floor. I don't know if this is clear. This is the floor. So you're looking down at the floor, and then the walls are like coming out like you're looking into a corridor or something. But yeah, then I was laying in bed, and I was like, man, I wonder how many different ways there are to map this out. And I was like, you know, you could even make it totally flat and have this be the floor, and then have the walls coming off of the side. And I was laying in bed, and my mind was racing, and I was like, this is a really stupid visual problem to be obsessing over because I'm going to do this one time and never have to do this again. But there's something interesting about visuals and information. I'm an illustrator, so the way visual and informational things intersect is kind of what I do. But what I really do right now is the painting show, and it's about that time. It's 7:05. Did I miss any messages? Isadora said hi, Owen. What's up, man? Isometric perspective is pretty cool. Very SimCity. Yeah, I guess I would call that isometric perspective. Anyway, it's time for the show. Let's do this.
Time we should start the service, and we want everybody that's here, that's got the Holy Ghost, to get in the service, put something in the service, and if you haven't got the Holy Ghost, come and seek the Lord and get it, because you need it. Amen. And I like to say this too, just be yourself. If you obey the Lord when we don't have photographers around, well, obey him when we do, and just be yourself. Now,
just be yourself. All you have to do, like that guy said. What's up, everybody? How's it going? I'm very pleased to be here. I genuinely look forward to the painting show every week. The intro's too long, but I really like that little clip, so I'm going to revamp it somehow. Maybe I'll make that the outro. Anyway, what's going on? So I'm excited to jump into what we got going down this week. If you've been here before, oh yeah, intro music, Painted Worlds, painting show. Band's called Painted Worlds. Check him out. Haven't seen him online. If anybody knows what happened, let me know. Haven't hit him up. I know he's busy. It's not a big deal. Anyway, though, so if you've never been here before, usually we talk a little bit about what's on my mind because that naturally affects the painting situation. And then we kind of just jump in, and sometimes it's just random stuff, sometimes little things I've picked up, sometimes I've planned a little topic out, but it's been a pretty crazy week information and study-wise, honestly, because, in case you don't know, in case you haven't been here for a little bit, or ever, I've been doing a little bit of an 1800s Christianity thing. Kind of started with the question of, why all these different movements came up in America at the same time. There's like a flourishing. It's almost like America's this cauldron churning out all these different new manifestations of Christianity in the 1800s. And also that was a gap in my understanding of the long arc of Christian history. That was probably the biggest gap that I have. Not that I know everything, but there was just total gray area. So I started poking into it. And we did Christian Science for a second. I was going to read their whole book, and it's like 700 pages, and I thought, I'm not really going to do that. Then we moved on to the granddaddy of 1800s American Christianity stuff, which would be Mormonism. And I poked into it a little bit, sort of getting my feet on the ground. We talked about some interesting theological questions that I got from them last week. And the reason this week was interesting in terms of studies is that I have a Book of Mormon here, so I was like, I really wonder, just almost like from an artistic, spiritual, general curiosity perspective, like what the style is that this is written in. I don't know if I've talked about it that much on here before, but along with art, one of my main things has always been reading different religious texts. I think when I was like 18 or so, I started just reading religious texts from different cultures and different groups, and I basically never stopped. So looking at my bookshelf, it's like 90% just sacred texts from different religions and things like that. And so I was curious, you can sort of get a lot from everything from the style to how it's written to, of course, the informational content. And I started reading it, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting for a variety of reasons that we'll talk about. But then for the last week, for some reason, everyone's been talking about it online. Really couldn't sleep from like midnight to 3 a.m. almost every night last week. So I'd wake up and be like clenching my teeth, and I'd be crazy wide awake. So I'd get up, and when I was up, I was like, well, I'm going to read this book, actually. I'm just going to see how far I can get into it. So I got about halfway through it already. It's a really long book. It's like 450 pages. Actually, it's longer than that. I think the copy I have, text front to text end, is like 530 pages. So I'm like 200 pages deep. So I think I'm just going to go for it and finish it. At first, I was thinking, am I really going to read this whole thing? But then I thought, I'm into weird theories about ancient America, American spirituality in general, American esoterica, religious texts, out-of-the-box things in general, interesting or strange manifestations of Christianity. I was like, how am I going to not read this, actually? So I'm about halfway through it. And I don't know if we'll do like a full recap of it, but I just kind of wanted to vent some of my thoughts about it before we jump in. Because it's been super interesting. And I don't know if you guys have read it. I don't know if anyone here has read it that's not Mormon. But it's really interesting reading it as a not Mormon person for a few reasons. One is that it's really difficult to maintain a kind of sense of, I don't want to even say neutrality, because I am pretty neutral when I investigate different thought systems. But I would say a sense of like not considering the wider, larger implications while I'm reading it. I'll be reading along, and all of a sudden I'll catch my mind sort of picking up into these larger questions of like, did Joseph Smith just like sit down and write this whole thing? And like, what was the deal with that? And like, if he did, like, what was his inspiration? And like, if he didn't, like, what was the inspiration then? Like something super physical, like, and I'm kind of trying to stay focused like on the text itself. And it really made me think a lot about art for that reason, because one of my main issues with the whole art kind of scene in general and art culture and studying art and things like that is it's really impossible to experience art in a vacuum, which is almost like how you should experience it in a way. I experienced that when I went to Italy and saw a lot of the famous Renaissance art for a long time. It's almost impossible, if you imagine a dozen people circled around you and they say, hey, what you're about to see? It's one of the best pieces of art ever. Get ready. It's the best painting you've ever seen in your life. And then when you walk in the room, of course, you're going to carry all that baggage from their explanation. You're going to be totally unable to have a genuine experience with the piece of art. So it's interesting because with the text, I was kind of having that also. I was like, I just want to read this as though I'm some random person in the 1800s who just picked this up and is just reading it without all the larger like network of biases and like implications and everything. So I thought that was interesting. And art in general is like that. I think we experience all art via that lens, whatever our preconceived notion is about it. So that's pretty interesting. Also, in terms of the content, I thought it was interesting also because it's almost like, again, just like totally taking a neutral view, but of course coming from the path that I'm on, subscribed to, coming down. It's almost like a bizarro version of the Bible in like a respectful way. It's like obviously like sort of purported as like another Bible. So it's really interesting reading along because the content is written in like a biblical format. You know, it has the numbers and it's written into like chapters and like books, and people have written the books. And it's all about like people groups and people groups interacting, and then it'll segue into like stories of particular individuals and them rising up, and like there are these battles and conflicts. So it's also interesting because it kind of reminds me of, you know, like you live in a town and you're really used to everything in that town, and then you go to another town and maybe you see something that's different there, like something that you would never think of, like their water tower or something. And then you come back to your town and you're like, wow, I never thought about our water tower before, but it's kind of cool actually. I never really noticed it, but when you see it in a different way in another place, you sort of reflect on your own situation more. And it was kind of doing that for me. As I was reading along, I was like, oh, I never thought about, you know, there's lots of items, a lot of like cool items as you're reading along in the story. Like there's this brass compass that only works if the people using it have like proper faith. And I was thinking, oh yeah, you know, back when I was reading the Bible, I was really intrigued by the items and how the items often constrain larger situations or are conditional on people's will or what people are thinking. So things like that. It was sort of popping up and making me like think about the Bible and then coming back to it. I guess I'll tell one anecdote from it, just because most people here have probably not read it. Just to give you, I was thinking about it, I was like, what would be the best way I could just tell people something and give them kind of the flavor that I was taking away from it. And we did a whole series on visions here from the Bible. We did almost all the ones I could find except for Ezekiel. It's kind of like the granddaddy of all the visions. We did dreams, even incorporated that in. We did a ton of them. Daniel, even like, what was it, the guy in prison with Joseph who dreams about like a basket of bread. We did like a ton of them. Most of the ones I could find actually. So obviously I'm biased towards that, and the book kind of starts with this vision, and as I'm halfway through, I feel like that almost more than anything characterizes the rest of the book. It comes right at the beginning, and it just sort of gives you a window into what I was taking away in terms of the imagery and stuff like that. And the vision is basically this guy, Lehi, has this vision. I don't know if he's dreaming or not. I guess I should have prepped this more, but I think it's more interesting if I'm just casually talking with you. He has this dream, and he sees this tree. And this tree has these luminous fruits on it. The fruits on it are like glowing. There are these like white glowing fruits of light. And he's taking them. I think he eats them, and maybe he wants to get his family to eat them. And I think they're not. I should have read this before the air, but I'm just telling you what I took away from it. You know, some people are like, should we eat it? I can't tell if we should eat it or not. And then he looks around, and there's this like iron rod stretching from the tree way out. And he sees all these people that are walking, and they're kind of trying to find the tree, but some of them are in the darkness, some of them are wandering off, some of them are lost, and some of the people have grabbed the iron rod, and they're walking, following the iron rod to the tree, and they get to the tree, and then they're eating some fruit and stuff. And then he looks over, and there's this floating building. There's a huge, elaborate building that's floating in the sky. I thought that was a really cool image. And there's people in the building, and they're all dressed very finely, whatever that means. And the people in the building are looking at the people eating the fruit on the tree, and they start laughing at them. So you have this huge floating building full of people, and they're laughing at the people who are eating these glowing fruits on the tree. And all of a sudden, the people that are eating fruits on the tree, some of them get kind of embarrassed. Some of them are like, oh, you know, they get kind of like feeling weird about it, and they get embarrassed, and they walk off, and they wander away from the tree into the darkness. And that's the vision that he has. So I thought that was really cool, honestly, just in terms of like archetypal spiritual symbolism and, you know, the floating building. I think we've talked about it a lot on here before, but as you're wandering along, sometimes you'll find like a weird combination of symbols. And sometimes they don't feel totally arbitrary. You know, I've talked about it before, but you can take like, you know, a few symbols and smash them together, like, oh, it's an astronaut with like a ladybug head, and they're in the desert and he's drinking wine or something. You can just cram things together. But sometimes you get a combination of symbols where you're like, oh, that's really cool. There's something kind of like that it's picking up, this like resonance that the symbols have together. And there was something about these people on the ground eating glowing fruit. And then they look over, and there's this floating building full of rich people laughing at them. I thought that was really cool. Honestly, I was like, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool. Anyway, just wanted to sort of tell you guys what I was thinking about, what was on my mind. We'll talk about that more. There's a few other themes that kind of kicked up in my mind that made me think more about, you know, Christianity, sort of thinking about it from, not from that perspective, but like I said with the water tower, you know, something comes up and you're like, oh, what does this mean for what I have back at my house? So we'll talk about that more as we go on, but I want to start painting. I want to get going on the painting right now. And I was thinking about what we were going to paint for this week. And I was thinking, you know, I don't really like to do like full-on illustrations of, oh, this is this chapter in this book and things like that, because then we are restrained. Then we're restrained by the content. We have to make it, the actual thing that it is and fit the description and all that stuff. So I was like, we could do something from the Book of Mormon. That feels a little bit like not the move for some reason. So I didn't want to do that. And I was really thinking about the whole 1800s American thing, the religious developments. And I had this thought. I picked this up from someone along the way. They were talking about political movements, but it also applies to religious movements. I don't even remember who this was at this point now. Someone in some video or something. Some academic. But they said, you think of a movement and you think of the founder, obviously, as the one who started the movement. Every movement has a founder, has an initial person, right? And you think of them as the one who started the movement. Every religion has like a figure who started it. What this person was saying was that, yeah, the founder starts it kind of, but really the person who the people who really get it going, the people who really make it into something are the first followers. And he was talking about politics, and he was saying, anyone can get up on a stage and say, hey, I have these ideas, let's do it this way. But those first people who decide to be a follower, they're really the ones who take it from just some random guy talking about some random stuff to being a movement. And I thought that was really interesting because it does apply to religion for sure. What made the Buddha, let's say, just not some guy sitting in the woods, right? The fact that he gathered followers, and then the fact that some people were, again, let's be just like academically neutral, obviously I'm not Buddhist, but that some people were, let's say, brave enough to follow this random guy, made it into a thing instead of being just some random dude. And I was thinking about that in terms of the 1800 religions and stuff like that, because they all have someone who started it. You have Seventh-day Adventism, you have, like, let's say, Ellen White, who's like, I had this vision, we're figuring out and stuff. But then you have the first few people that pool around and who are basically, whether they're misguided or not, there's a level of bravery to say, you know what, I think that this person is correct, and we're going to be the first, 5 or 6 people who sign up for this thing. We're going to be the first people that do this thing. And I was thinking, we did these images of the prophet before. The prophet is sort of a solid archetype. It has different visuals. We had the angel carrying that guy in a box. We had the guy with the flaming head and the books and everything. But the follower is kind of like a less explored or less instantly fleshed out archetype and image in my mind. I don't really think about the followers or the first follower as an image, So that's what I wanted to do right now. I wanted to make an image of sort of the archetypal sort of religious follower in a way, because we're all followers in some way, unless you literally totally completely made up whatever you think from scratch, which sounds kind of impossible, but I would be open to hearing about it. We're all followers in some way, and I thought that was just a really interesting thing. The term follower often has a negative connotation, doesn't it? So what I wanted to do here is I wanted to get a little guy down here. This is how I think this is going to go, but we're kind of just going to wing it a little bit, honestly. This is a winging it episode. I want to have this little guy down here, and then I want to get the landscapes. I really want to nail the rolling hills stretching out into the distance thing. So we're going to try something new painting-wise, I feel that I can pretty solidly, obviously, because of my lifetime of art, but also the last year of doing this, pretty solidly set down and do, here's a cool symbol, here's a cool symbol, there's how they're related, here's another cool thing, now they're part of some guy's head or something, making fun of myself. But I want to try something a little bit riskier, so I really want to nail the rolling hills thing going off into the distance. Because also I was thinking, all this new religion manifestation, part of the American spirit also, understanding the American spirit is part of why I'm poking into all this stuff, I think has to do with at least the feeling of westward expansion, infinity stretching out before you. So I want to nail that. And if we mess it up, we can just tear this page off and do another one. We've never done 2 in one day, but if it doesn't go well, we can just do another one. But I want to try something a little bit new. And then maybe we'll get something in the sky, like an angel or something. I don't really know, honestly. We're just going to kind of go for it. So that's the plan right now. And I got some big brushes because I want to, I really want to nail that, like I said, hazy, rolling hills in the distance. And I will be looking at the chat, so last thing, if you want me to see it, you have to put @Owen Cyclops like Isidore did. Otherwise, I'm not going to see it. But let's just jump right in here. So you know the deal. The first color that we use is kind of what's going to decide a lot of the flavor and essence of this. I'm looking at magenta. We could outline the guy in magenta. Brown kind of feels like the most appropriate. Brown's the most solid bet. Maybe we'll go with that, because then no matter what happens, this is going to be a pretty dark brown. This is burnt umber, so it's a red, kind of earthy, dark brown. Because then no matter what happens up here and around, this will really stand out, because we'll have this guy, boom, in high contrast down at the bottom. And as you know, if you watch the show, contrast is how we tell the viewer where to look in a painting. And I think we'll give this guy some kind of like hiking staff or something, some kind of thing that implies that he's following a path, because that's basically what a follower does. In some ways, a follower follows a path that's been laid out for him. Cool. Okay, and let's come in right here. So as usual, I also don't want to get sucked into too many details, but as this is going to be the main kind of focusy thing, we'll make him kind of a nice contrast to the hopefully washed out space all around. And the first question actually, so just so you know what's going on in my mind, I was going to drop him right center. This is a kind of a big decision, I guess, in terms of the composition. I was going to put him right here at the center. Where we put him is going to affect the vibe a little bit. I think it might be cooler to put him off to the side over here. Usually in pictures, unless you're doing something really intentionally, you don't want to cut things halfway, because it starts to make things feel very stale and like balanced in a bad way, like balanced like in stasis, not being dynamic. Could put it over here, could have put him over here. Let's put him over here a little bit, just a little bit over to the left. And also I want to put him over to the left a little bit, because if I go with that kind of round head, if he's facing in a direction, I can put the eye in. If he's facing straight forward, you're just going to see the back of his head, and it's going to be a little ambiguous what he is and what he's doing. So we'll grab some brown over here. Perfect. And let's see if I need to bring the lamp in a little bit more. We're good. Let's see, I'm going to make him kind of big, actually. Perfect. Cool. So we'll throw in this little guy down here. I was looking at 1800s American art, so I was like, you know, we could, when we were doing the more Renaissance-y stuff, I did a Titian allegory, and we pulled up the painting and looked at it. That was pretty cool. I do want to do more stuff like that. But the 1800s American art doesn't really fit the vibe of the show too much. Perfect. We'll throw this guy in. I'll talk about why in a second. And let's see. Might have made him too big, but it's not a big deal. I almost want to give him a backpack that just feels kind of appropriate. Kind of like he's setting out on like a long journey. I suppose that is part of being a follower also. So he has this pack back here. Put this little buckle down. Perfect. And yeah, someone said in the chat, I find it hard not to make fun of LDS, so hearing you talk about it unbiased is kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that from going through all the different sacred texts that I've read, not that it makes me like galaxy brain or anything, but I do feel like if you go in with kind of the presupposition of like, oh my god, this is going to be so stupid, whether or not something actually is false. You know, I read like parts of the Quran and things that I like obviously don't subscribe to personally. But I feel like if you go in just like looking for dumb things, it's kind of like, you know, when someone doesn't like a politician or something and they just like blindly like freak out about every little thing they do. Kind of prevents you from seeing like the actual reality. So just kind of trying to go in as unbiased as possible. And obviously his legs are going to go off the page a little bit, which is fine. So I'm going to have him kind of like walking a little bit, almost like he's about to start some sort of epic long journey. Perfect. It's pretty cool. And I don't want to give him the shepherd staff. I pretty much always use the shepherd staff, but he's not the shepherd, right? Because he's a follower. So he is going to have just like a stick, just like a hiking stick, and we'll make it a different color. And I guess we'll give him hair. We'll try not leave out certain details. So we'll come over here. Perfect. Perfect. Cool. Boom. Perfect. And I'm going to come in and shade this a little bit. I know he's really tiny, but I almost wanted to get the kind of Taoist painting thing going on where we'll have this like huge landscape and then like the tiny guy in the front. And then maybe we'll get an angel in the sky or something. I think that would be cool. And here, these browns are really nice to like pull out the color from. I outlined it with this black marker, so it's going to pull up some blue from the outside. when you get a cheap black marker, that's not really black pigment. Black pigment is actually kind of expensive. So if you get like a Crayola marker or cheap Sharpies or things like that, the pigment is actually a really, really dark blue. So it'll pull up some blue from the sides, but I was banking on that. I thought it would look kind of cool. Cool. So we'll get this down here. Perfect. Cool. We'll shade in his hair a little bit. And I'm going to throw in a different color for the stick. A little bit of a fade going on there. That's perfect. Perfect. I love the fade in the hair that I've been doing recently. For the stick, the following stick, I want to use raw sienna. This is like the most golden brown that I have. It's like a nice like warm hue to it. So yeah, I was looking at the 1800s art, and some people might not know, but 1800s art in America really split really hard into like two categories. I would say about half of it, I don't know what the percentages are. I'm totally making up those percentages. But if you go to a museum or something, what you'll see about half of it is, could be filed under like folk art, you know, so it's not trying to be like highfalutin, like oil painting and stuff. Very 2D. That actually does really fit the vibe of the show. If you were an art scholar, you might even call it like kind of a naive style, as in it's obviously not by someone who is trained in the visual arts. Most colonial art is like that. You know, you'll have a hill with like a church on it, let's say, and then a bunch of trees around it, and everything's like super flat. Actually, it kind of is exactly like my art, honestly. And then there's a subsection of that, which is people who are trying to do European style painting who can't. So if you go to a museum that has American art, you'll see a lot of like really bad portraits of people. That happens too because, you know, we just became a new country, so we didn't have like art schools and stuff. But then the other aspect of 1800s American art, it's kind of interesting. I'll shade this too. I'll shade the stick in too. Is American artists ask themselves, well, you know, what do we have that can compete with Europe? You know, Europe has Roman ruins, crazy beautiful cities. I mean, all the different subjects of European painting, high culture, people in fancy dresses, you know. And the American artists ask themselves, you know, we don't have any of that. What can we do? Cliffhanger while I decide what the next move is here. So I know that we're going to do this rolling hill thing that I was talking about, but we're in the foreground right now, which means we have a few options. I could put a tree. It would be kind of cool. Maybe we can get like some luminous fruit, like a reference to the story I just told you. In here in the front, we could even push like the Japanese thing. Sometimes I've mentioned before, a technique in Japanese printmaking is that they'll put something hyper in the foreground, and that will push everything back further and further. So if this was like a Japanese print or something, you can imagine maybe there'd be like a branch coming out here, and there's like a bird on the branch, and it's implying it's like way in your face, and then this guy is here, and then there's something way in the back. Maybe we'll do something like that. I'm worried it's going to break up the sort of like flat space that we're using, but we will put a tree in the front. Let's put a tree in the front for sure. We'll at least do that, and we'll make it kind of the same color as this guy, so he's not the only... Actually, you know what? I was going to say so he's not the only dark brown thing, but it would be cooler if he was the only dark brown thing. So we're going to use burnt sienna. It's a different flavor of dark brown. I'm just going to throw in a tree, and we'll put in some white fruits. Maybe I'll come back and put a shine on them. Something about that image of like luminous fruit was really cool. I hope that was actually in the, I hope that was actually in there and I didn't just make that up. But I really am like 99% sure that it was. That's how it was always depicted anyway when I looked up images of it. Anyway, so the 1800s American artists asked themselves, you know, what do we have that can compete with the European stuff? And they were thinking, you know, crazy buildings, we don't have that. All the high culture stuff, we don't have that. And finally they said, oh, we have nature. We have crazy nature that's just as good, if not better, as anything in Europe. So it sort of starts with this school called the Hudson River School, obviously in New York. I'm just going to throw in a tree, and I'm going to have it come off the side here too. I don't want to take too much room from the front. Where basically Americans just got crazy good at painting epic views of nature. And you'll see a lot of that in American painting, and it's actually pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. And the impetus behind it was what I just said. Oh, how can we compete with like the cultures that we came from or the cultures in Europe? And the answer was, well, we have crazy mountains and nature and everything like that. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you can Google Hudson River School painting on your phone or something. Or if you've seen photographs by Ansel Adams, kind of is drawing on the Hudson River School, in my opinion. But basically, it's just super epic views of nature. It's just like the most epic, like go to Yellowstone, see a postcard. That's literally exactly what it is. Except they wouldn't have been aware of Yellowstone. Maybe they would have been aware of it, but they wouldn't have been there at the very beginning. So a lot of the nature painting, I was thinking, doesn't really fit the vibe of the show. Would be kind of cool to do something like that, since it really is like America's roots in painting. I imagine there was some like theological dimension to it, naturally, of like God's country and everything. But I didn't. When I was really into that, I didn't see anything explicitly explicated in that department. Let's see. We used Viridian last time as our green. I was really displeased by how transparent it was. So we're going to use a different green, olive green, permanent green. None of these are sounding very enticing over here at the green store. So let's mix one. I'm going to take the Viridian. So this is actually the color that I want, but the problem with this color is that it's transparent. It's like hyper transparent. So we got to beef it up with something. I can't find the sap green, but that's not a big deal because we're just going to roll with it. We have two other greens here. Brilliant green, permanent green, light. We do have this color called olive green. I never use this, but maybe it does have a slightly like colonial, early America flavor. Let's see. Let's see if we get in here. Let's check it out. Maybe this is a good move. It's almost like an army green. I feel like that's what a little kid would describe this as. Let's try it out. Let's get it going. Actually, it's perfect. It's almost like sap green. I'll draw it out a little bit so you can see it on the camera. It's kind of dark, but we can make it work. Kind of torn if I should just go with this or get the dark in. You know, if we want to make the fruits like luminous fruits, which I do just because that's a really solid phraseology, luminous fruits, we're going to darken it up a little bit. Because if we make the ground that it's on darker, it'll be easier to make it look like something that's light, obviously. A lot of painting is about using illusions and juxtaposing things and things like that to get the effects that you want. So I'm just going to throw this in here. And otherwise, I see someone ask me, some people might be asking me questions in the chat. No one tagged me yet. I just want to see if there's anything else I want to make sure I hit before we get into quote-unquote random stuff. You know, one other thing, it's fitting because we're going to be painting a little bit of like a rolling landscape here, is that the other thing that it made me think of, looking at all this stuff and thinking about it, and I've been going pretty hard, I've been like reading about it and listening to it and all that stuff, is most religion, not most of it, but a lot of religion is characterized by a sense of the sacredness of a place. And I thought that was really interesting to see ported over into a Christian context, because obviously for a lot of these groups, but maybe especially Mormons, you know, America is this like sacred place. And actually in Mormonism there is almost like, a little out of my depth right now, so don't take what I'm saying at like face value, but like almost like prophecy or hyper sacredness to the fact that we're here in America, this is where all this stuff happened, that's not coincidental, America's going to be this like, you know, serve this role like in the future, X, Y, and Z, and God like brought these people here, you know, Americans in general, so that, you know, the church could be restored and all this stuff. And I was thinking, you know, it must be crazy to like be out in Utah, let's say, and actually really think that it's, you know, land that God like delivered you. And I remembered looking at a lot of like, let's say even like shamanistic religions, not that I'm making a comparison there, or Shinto, or even Islam being tied to Mecca and stuff like that. I was thinking of how place informs a religion and how sense of place informs it. And it's interesting because you don't really get that in a lot of, well, let me rephrase. That manifests differently in different forms of Christianity, and it's sort of a dimension of things I'd never really considered. This looks really cool with the lightness and everything, but I'm wondering if I'll be able to pull off the luminous fruits thing on such a light background. I actually really love this texture. I can't tell if I should push it or not. I think what I'm going to do is try and use these lighter areas as the glow of the fruits. So let's see. might mess this up, but this is kind of an experimental episode. So I'm going to try and come in with like darker spots, and then we'll come back in and paint in the fruits later once this is all dry. So I was thinking of how that manifests in different manifestations of Christianity. I mean, Catholicism obviously has that. Rome is the non-coincidental, absolute, sacred place, right? Obviously. Orthodoxy depends, could go either way, I guess. Then Protestantism, kind of the same thing, could go either way. Usually not really. I don't really think of like Southern Baptists and everything having like a sacredness to the place that they're in, but I'm not really part of their crew, so I couldn't really say. And that also made me think of you know, the flow of history and place as it relates to Christianity, because we have Rome and the Roman Empire, right? That's obviously where it all started. But then what happens after that is kind of up to whatever group you're subscribing to. I'm going to come back in and try and like dab up a little bit of like light areas in here. Yeah, perfect. It's actually way too light, but it's all good. You know, so you have Rome, and then some people I've read talk about, you know, I guess if you're Orthodox, you would say after Rome, it moved east to Constantinople. Then I think most Orthodox people would say, well, then it kind of became Russia, like the center of Christianity, I guess you could say. And then what happens after that is kind of up in the air. I mean, is it still Russia? I guess in some ways, this one thing I was reading, this guy was saying, well, then it was America. And I felt like, well, you know, was it really? I don't know, maybe. But he was describing it in terms of like missionary activity and where the most missionaries were coming from. And I guess if you think about it, America used to have like a crazy missionary presence. He also talked about Great Britain. Maybe Great Britain was like the seat of it for a while. And I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, you know, that's interesting. Like, what's the seat of Christianity right now? What's like the sacred place? And again, like if you're Catholic, obviously, it would be the Vatican. I guess, like I said, most Orthodox people would say it's like Russia, maybe. I don't know. I actually can't tell. All right, cool. Looks pretty good. We'll come back there. Maybe I should make it a teeny bit darker just because this is like straight up white. Cool. Something I do every episode on the show. Make something lighter and then come back and make it darker. Okay. Let's see. So I'm trying to think how I want to play this right now, because I think what we're going to do is throw down... I see questions, so I will take them in a second. Or maybe just comments. So I'm going to throw down this horizon right here, and then we'll get the kind of rolling hill effect in. I'm going to put this in dry with no water, and then I'll come in and make this pretty wet, and I think that's how we're going to sort of get that distance and draw effect. But I actually don't know how it's going to go, so some people like when it's a little bit chaotic, and I think that's probably what's going to happen right now, because I don't know how it's going to go, to be totally honest with you. I guess I'm deciding right now what I want this line to look like and how I want it to be, because part of what I was thinking, you know, of course I was thinking about all the Mormon stuff, but it applies for the American spirit in general, is, you know, you're starting on the East Coast in America, you have the colonies, and then you're expanding west. I was listening to one talk, and this guy was saying, yeah, and then they went to, maybe it was Indiana or something. They went to Indiana, and that was the end of the western frontier at that time. And I was like, wow, that's the furthest people were going. Indiana, imagine. So I kind of want that spreading out, and I really want to hit like the Kansas cornfields after the greenness. I really want to get that effect in, especially with the colors that I think are really perfect for those sort of Midwestern fields. So I guess this front up here has to be green. I guess it has to be kind of like a dark green. I can't tell if it's too powerful a move to use the same green from the tree. Maybe we'll just do it. Let's just do it right now. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to add some brown, and this will be like our front line over here. Should I change brushes? I got a lot of unanswered questions right now that we are going through live together. I'll make it a little bit of a thicker brush. Just in case. Cody says, what's up, man? When at the Grand Canyon Information Center, I saw a quote by Teddy Roosevelt. The canyon is beautiful but terribly unearthly. Feels like that when looking at Hudson's school pics. Yeah, that's true. A lot of the American landscape does have that, especially in the West, has that, like, I don't know, otherworldly in a weird way quality. It's hard to pin down. Okay, so I'm just going to come through here. I guess I should have made this like a bright green, but I didn't. We'll see how that decision plays out for me. Cool. And what I'm going to do is just fade that color down. So I'm going to grab a big brush. We're using the flat brush even right now. We're just going for it. What was the next thing? Any thoughts on recent UFO craze and revelations from the government? I know you think what you think they are, but do you think the government knows? Interesting. Pivoting from 1800s American religion stuff. It's funny when I was... So I've been doing the 1800s thing for a minute, but I also like... I don't know if people saw the comic I posted, but I posted this comic about Godzilla, and obviously I'm always on a variety of paranormal topics, and I had this idea. I was like, man, it would be awesome if someone made like a Civil War thing, but it had like all this paranormal stuff in it. Like Godzilla attacks the Confederate soldiers. That would be awesome. There's got to be some UFO Civil War crossover. I think at the time I was thinking of looking into if the American soldiers in the Civil War ever saw any like flying objects or anything like that. I mean, they probably had to, right? See, this brush is not even big enough. It means we got to break out. We got to break out the master brush. It's time. Any thoughts about the recent disclosures? Nah, people have asked me, and I feel like honestly it's kind of annoying. Not that they ask me. I love that people ask me stuff, and I love talking about it with people. It's annoying on my end for me because I kind of don't have like a crazy like hot take about it. It's kind of just sketchy, to be honest with you, which is one of the worst feelings you can get when analyzing stuff. Just look at something and be like, yep, that's kind of weird and sketchy, but not have like a hardcore answer for it. So I don't really know. I don't really know what to think about it, honestly. You know, it's also weird because they've been dropping all the disclosure stuff for so long. I mean, I remember when I went down for like my grandfather's funeral back in the day, and my cousin was trying to show me some doc about like disclosure and everything, and that was like a while ago, man. And I remember actually same deal. I remember being down there in Florida, and Tucker Carlson had someone on his show talking about the Army seeing UFOs and stuff. See, if I was smart, I would have put this background color in first, but you know that I'm not. So I don't really know, man. It's super sketchy, and I have to feel like there is some point to it. Maybe it's just going to be like a slow burn of building up from like a few weirdos saying, hey, did you see the government said this? To like, oh, of course everyone knows that, and then something will happen. But I don't really know. As for does the government know what they are? It's kind of interesting. I don't know, man. I mean, they must have some idea, right? I mean, they can't be that naive. I don't know if you've seen, what's it called, Project Stargate and all that stuff, where like, I'm just going to throw a little green down here. It's sort of like a weird color that I got going on, but I actually kind of like it. I don't know if you've seen like Project Stargate and all that stuff. See, this kind of like wet brush texture is really dope. It's really good. It's actually, we're going to kind of try and get some more of that going on. Just break up the texture, just break up the visual space and make it as interesting as possible. But you know, the government's research like psychic phenomena and all that stuff. So, I don't know, man. Anyone into that stuff, though, should really watch this movie. I recommended it a little bit, but wanted to write up something about it, but you know, I'm like crazy busy. But there is a movie called An Honest Liar that's really relevant to the government researching paranormal stuff, because I think people like me are prone to take it at face value because we know that that stuff exists. Like, we all know that like at least some paranormal things are real. But what this guy did, his name's The Amazing Randy. He's literally like a stage magician. It's really epic. You should really watch the movie. It's not what the whole movie's about, but there's a part in there about this where he essentially I don't want to say pranks because it's not malevolent, but he basically gets these two kids and like trains them, and he totally gets these scientists from the government who are studying paranormal phenomena to think that the kids are actually psychic, but they're not. And it's because, just like with psychedelics, the scientists running those tests typically have a pretty hardcore bias towards finding the phenomenon that they're looking for. So, and it was like for years, like these kids were literally like deep undercover for years, pretending to be psychic, using like basic deception, stage magic tricks and stuff like that. And then finally, after years, they like revealed it. But it's relevant for us because it shows that when the government studies things like that, they're just as prone to cognitive bias and things like that as anyone else is. So I thought it was relevant because I remember when the Stargate docs dropped that everyone was like, yeah, see, like the government knows that like psychic stuff is real, which is true. But it's also important for us not to take that at like completely face value and say like, oh, so they actually found it when they say they found it, because that's not necessarily the case. It's kind of cool. You can see these drops like just receding into the distance. Like, you know, they kind of like really fuzz out and almost like go away. So I just think that's relevant to the UFO stuff, because in my mind, like, yeah, dude, I mean, have you looked into like some of the experiments where the government, not the government, but some groups, like, they literally like slow release people on like DMT so they can explore the DMT space for like a crazy long time and everything like that. So I have to assume that like the government's aware of like all the way that weird stuff integrates. But as for why they would tell people and why they'd be telling people, honestly, I have no idea, but it makes me feel really uncomfortable. That's the answer. I don't know, but it makes me feel really uncomfortable. That's why, I mean, we'll go back to the Mormon and Christian religion stuff in a second, but it's actually related, because that's why I just tweeted about it. But like, we actually have to like tell people that it's like a super physical phenomenon, because it's so unintuitive that people, I think, aren't going to figure it out. I didn't figure it out until someone told me, but like once someone tells you, it's so obvious. So like, I think that, you know, as many conversations as you can like squeeze that into in real life without becoming more that guy than you're comfortable being, that would be smart. That would be smart. Because we have to kind of reach a critical mass so that when they finally put, like, you know, the aliens on CNN or something, that enough people are smart enough to be like, oh, this is not something I'm going to take at total and complete face value. Okay. So we will keep talking about that. We always have a lot of burners going on the show. But right now, we have to make a little bit of a call, because I want, like I've been saying, that receding into the distance effect. Part of me thinks I should just go for it. I should just wet the paper and just go for it and see what happens. I guess I should have some colors prepped. This is definitely a cornfieldy color. We got to get, we got to get the yellow ochre on deck. Raw sienna is like the rich burlap sack color, and then yellow ochre is like the true burlap sack color. But somewhere between them, look, you can see the difference. You can see the difference perfectly, right? But somewhere between them is cornfield color. If we're going to get cornfields going, I actually want a little bit of the cadmium yellow. We're going to get the cadmium yellow out here. Boom. Perfect. That's a really good cornfield color. We talked about it last year on the show, but when I was driving out there, out west, getting the western feel, I was really struck by the colors of everything. In fact, right over here, I'm going to pour it over a painting. This is probably one of my favorite ones we've ever done on the show. I did this painting of St. Nicholas. Oh, I love how this turned out. This is right before I had to go to the hospital, actually. I did this show with you guys, like the next day I had to go to the hospital. I'm fine then. It's all good. But I remember when I was driving, I was really struck by like the fields of these colors and everything. So I'm kind of trying to port that over a little bit here also as we're thinking about the West and everything. I don't know what Utah looks like. I've never been out there. I've never been further out into the desert, but maybe we'll see. We'll see how the rolling landscape goes, and then maybe we'll get the full actual West in there. Maybe we won't. I'm not sure. It's more about like the spiritual seeker than like anyone or any place actually in particular. Okay. So, technical note, I'm getting the color off this brush right now, and what I'm going to do, I've done this a lot before, but just in case people aren't clear on the technical nature of it, I'm going to get the fibers in the paper wet so that when I put more paint onto it, the fibers are already interlocked and enmeshed, and then the paint will kind of spill out. You experience that all the time with paper towels. If you get a paper towel wet and then you get it on a stain, you know how it soaks into the paper towel? It's because those fibers are wet. That's exactly what I'm going to be doing right here with the watercolor paper. It's just that these fibers are bigger. In cheap paper, like in printer paper or something, like what you have in your printer at home, the fibers are very, very small. If you have a piece of printer paper around, you could actually tear it and see how small the fibers are. The fibers in here are much bigger. That's part of what makes expensive paper expensive, along with a variety of other things. Sometimes you can get Japanese paper and they have these crazy long fibers. They call them like dragons or something. And the fibers are literally so long, if you put a piece of ink, you can watch it go up a fiber almost like an electric charge. It's really awesome. Conversely, the paper is like $12 a sheet, so I don't have it here. Nor is it useful to me. All right, so I got this super wet down here, and I actually don't know how this is going to go. I have no idea what's going to happen right now, but let's just kind of go for it. Should I use the big brush? Let's do it. So I'm going to come in with the Viridian first, just the straight Viridian. This might be a mistake because this is a really dark green, but it's also transparent, so let's just kind of go for it. Okay, didn't really do that much. We're going to come in with the olive green instead. Just going to come in here. Yeah, that is specifically what I'm talking about right there. Oh, I got the camera, the light. Perfect. Okay. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Trying to get the light so you can actually see what I'm doing. It reflects off the wet part of the painting, so my bad. All right. Perfect. Okay, and I'm going to try and drag this green down a little bit. Kind of feel like I shouldn't even be doing this now. Maybe I should just let it happen naturally, but I can assist the process a little bit. That looks pretty good. I hope it'll fuzz out so you can't really see the strokes there. And then I don't really know how to make the transition from the green into the other colors, so I'm going to take the yellow ochre. You can always use yellow ochre to dull any other color. That's really like what it's for in a palette. Let's see, maybe I can just come out like this. Cool. Maybe this will be nice because we'll have these kind of like more dead colors, frankly, up in the front. Oh, that looks good. That looks good. And it's going to get fuzzy, I guess, so we'll kind of decide how we want to handle it, but wasn't really sure how else to do it. Okay, now we can go into the straight yellow ochre. So we'll get just one. Perfect. Cool. Okay. Just gonna go for it here. And again, I'm gonna try and like drag this down a little bit. I might have to come back in with the paper towel and control a little. Oh, I can do that actually right now. Perfect. Oh, that's the move. That's the move right there. Perfect. Then I'm going to throw down some of the raw sienna. So this is a lot more of like a lively color, but it's also darker. Okay. And I think what I'm going to do is use the paper towel to dab this up and make it lighter as we go back, because I really said it like 100 times, but I really want that like receding into the distance effect. This cadmium yellow is going to be too much to just hit it straight, but it really almost is wheat field color, so maybe with the raw sienna we can get it. Yeah, there we go. That's wheat field color. And I'm going to hit right at the top of the water streak. Okay. Okay. So now we gotta like tame all this. The thing about watercolor is you like kind of let the chaos happen and then you come back in and you see what kind of order we can get out of this. And I'm just gonna see what we can do here because this is way too much up here. Cool. Awesome. That's good. Okay, and then I want to dab this up too. Okay, get this dabbed up also. Maybe a little bit too much, but we can always come back. We can always come back and... Actually, that's pretty good, although I don't like this. I don't like whatever that is. Okay. Okay. Okay, now we are kind of talking over here. Now we are kind of talking over here. I'm just going to come back in with a smaller brush. That's what we're going to do. We're going to move from larger to smaller. And let's see, I'm just going to come in. I'm going to hold the brush differently. I'm going to hold it like this so that the point and then the hairs coming down are hitting it. I can't tell if this is a good call or not because, yeah, this is a good call actually. Perfect. I almost want to make the arch more perfect, but I actually kind of like that it's not perfect. Gives it kind of a cool quality. Okay, and then obviously I'll have to come back and make this line in the front way darker to get the effect I want, but it's all good. What was the next color? I totally forgot. It's the Viridian with the brown. It's the Viridian with yellow ochre. Let's see. Yeah, we can get away with this. It's going to be way too dark. Way too dark. Wow, it's crazy dark. I have to blot it up immediately. Okay, yeah, someone said the bottom kind of looks like a pottery glaze texture. Yeah, it does. It does. I'm trying to get the texture going a little bit. Let's see if we can get that. That's exactly what I want. Yes, that exact effect. Okay, perfect. Okay, now we're going to keep moving up. This was the raw sienna. I actually, you know, honestly, I really like how that looks. I almost don't want to mess with it once we get further back. I can't tell if I should mess with it or not. It actually does look kind of cool. Honestly, it looks kind of cool, but it's a little ill-defined. I don't want it to, you know, we got to make it read a little bit. So this was yellow ochre. So I'm just going to come in here. Yeah, perfect. That was perfect. I don't want it to look like I just came in and painted a line. So I'm kind of trying to land in between the two extremes of total chaos and then also the line. This is really nice too, but I feel like I gotta clarify it a little bit. Yeah, that's good. Moving the light around a little bit. And let's see, maybe we can just come in with water. I'm just gonna come in with the straight water. Yeah. Cool. Okay. We're gonna have to come in and clarify a little bit, but it actually does look pretty cool. Once I tighten up the foreground, I think we'll get a little bit more of that like receding effect that we want in the back. I really like this texture. I don't think I need to clean that one up a little bit, but I do want to come and just get a little bit of the color in. Let's see. Maybe I just need to... Okay. Interesting. I don't know. Maybe I should push it a little bit. I am going to push it. We got to. We got to push. We got to push, obviously. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. I just want that yellow, that like satisfying yellow. Perfect. That was a big improvement. And then I don't want this to be too visually confusing, so as much as I like that texture we got from the paper towel, we got to keep moving. That happens a lot in painting. You'll get some like accident, and you're like, oh my god, that's the thing that we got to focus on, but then that becomes like the obstacle as you're moving forward. You can't pin it down too hard like that. The whole thing needs to develop like a Polaroid. So if you're attached emotionally to one little random aspect of it, that won't like develop with the rest of the picture, and it'll like ruin everything basically. Okay. Honestly, since I didn't know how that would turn out, I'll take pretty much anything as that's not a total failure. At least on the first pass. It looks pretty good though. I just gotta get this line. It's too dark though, isn't it? Sorry, we're going back and forth here, but this is like a little bit worth calibrating. Cool. Okay. And then the other thing that's clouding the visual situation, in my opinion, right now is this whiteness, because this doesn't make any sense in terms of the visual effect that I'm going for. So let's see if we can fix that up, and hopefully we'll just kind of see it fade into focus once I darken this a little bit. I don't know if that'll actually happen, but let's see. I'm gonna throw down a little bit of this yellow even, just to get everything all nice and like married together. But really, we're gonna come in with the green. We're gonna come in with the green, obviously. Perfect. I'm really torn. I'm torn. It's like almost right there. It's a little messy, but it's almost like the tightness that I want. It's kind of cool though. It's definitely kind of cool. I think that maybe I should throw in the sky. Maybe I should throw in the sky, and then we'll have a decision as to whether or not we nailed it. Also, I made this a little bit bowed, so this actually can't be the horizon. So that means that we have one more pass over the horizon. And I'm just gonna actually pick up this color, and I'm just gonna come across as flat as possible. And I'm gonna do it again, just to make sure I get. And that's our actual horizon. Let's see. I don't know if it's a good call. There's not really any differentiation between like the top cornfield and the horizon now. So I'm going to come back and just dry this up a little bit. And then for the sky color, obviously, very obviously, we need to use cerulean blue. This is like 3,000% the only possible blue option right now. So this is what we're going to use. And if I can't open the tube, I'm going to cut it open. That's how badly we need to 100% use this color. Okay, boom, got it open. It's about to grab the knife. This is the blue. This is the only blue it could possibly be. All the other blues are way too much. Way too much. I guess we have an option here too, as long as we're going for these big epic fades, if we want to put in like a sunrise or something. I guess we're thinking about, you know, the follower as a symbolic theme. You know, it almost makes sense for it to be night, right? He's like walking off into the night, you know, you don't know what's going to happen, but the thing is the cerulean blue is just way too tight, so we're not going to use night color. It would mess up the whole situation we got going on. So I'm just going to throw down the color here. I've been making sure the blue on the outside from the marker doesn't come out, but for here it's fine. It'll actually be kind of cool. I thought that would be kind of a cool effect down below too, but then I realized I was doing all these yellows. You don't want the blue to like bleed in there, so. But it gives you kind of a cool effect if you do it intentionally. I'm going to come down here, and let's just go for it with the cerulean blue. I'm going to load up the brush, and let's just go for it. Oh, perfect. But we need way more than that. We need way more than that going on right now. I want this everywhere. I want that effect all the way across. I'm really tempted to come in with a super dark blue at the top, but I can't tell if that's crazy or not. I kind of want to just break out the cobalt blue. Let's just let that ride. I'm hoping it'll spill down. I can never tell. I can't tell if I should bank on it. I don't want it to streak too much. I think that that'll be good. I think that'll be good. And I'm not gonna go for the dark blue up at the top. Someone asked if there's gonna be a path. Yeah, I'm gonna throw down a path for sure. And I'll read your messages in a second. I've just been kind of with the wet, when it's wet, when the paper's wet, it's like a pressure sensitive, a time sensitive situation. So let's get up in here, and I guess I'm just gonna come back because I want that like hyper dark color. It would be really tight actually to throw a moon up in here into the dark blue sky. Oh yeah, dude. Look at that color. You're really gonna tell me that's not the perfect color? Really? Impossible. You cannot tell me that. I just wanted more. I want to come down. You know, I could actually do a little bit of a crazy maneuver and like tilt the page down a little bit to make the pigment run down. It's kind of cheating. I don't want to do that. Huh, well now I have an interesting situation because I don't have the blue down here. Dare I do something completely insane? Dare I? Because we could throw in like a crazy sunrise because it's wet. It's not bringing the blue down. I can't really put in a lighter blue. I could just throw in a sunrise right now. I think we're going to do it. I think we're going to do it. We've come this far. We've come this far on the madness. We might as well completely and totally commit. It might be too crazy, but you know what? We are here to make things happen. We're not here to play it safe on this earth. It's not why we're here. So let's just do it. This is not one of the cadmium colors, which I always use. It's Orange Lake, which we've been using recently. That means it's more transparent, so it might be perfect for this. I really don't know how this is going to go, but let's just go for it. Oh, this is going to be insane. Okay, let's do it. Okay. And actually, I'm going to tilt this up because I want it to flow upwards. So I'm tilting the paper. I guess you can tell. Well, it actually looks awesome. And it actually almost looks more like red rocks, like in a desert, than a sunrise, which is absurdly perfect. Wow, I feel really epic about making that call right now. That was tight. That was really tight. Nice. Nice. Okay. Wow, that was really intense. I was just really focused for like a really long time. Okay, I have to, not that we're gonna have like dead air or something. I'm gonna let this dry for like literally just 10 seconds. So let's see if I missed anything in the chat. Mount Athos, yeah, Mount Athos might be the Orthodox center. I had a dream about that one time before I knew what it was in a weird way. It was kind of cool. Any thoughts on New Jerusalem and Revelations? We'll talk about that later, not off the top of my head. I want to look into that more. Put it that way. I want to do like an image and some images based on it, but not 100% to like go off on it right now. Pretty sure the place for Christians, even Catholics, is to them the general area that has all the rocket stuff happening right now. You mean like literal rockets? Oh, you're talking about Israel. I thought you were making a joke about like space being a new religion, but you're talking about the Holy Land. Yeah, I guess that would also be the natural like place. For me, Christianity seems like such an active religion that I don't see it anchored to the ancient. It's not inert. There's an expansiveness to it, I feel. Yeah, it's interesting. There's that tension between it being like rooted into particular historical times and the flow of history, but also being like beyond time. Michael Heiser has a book called Sacred Time that I was reading. It's pretty cool. It doesn't disregard the ancient, of course, and there is a case against my claim that could be made by more Orthodox traditions. I'm just speaking of my own experience of Christianity. Yeah, and that's also part of like going into the American thing. I don't know if you're American, but not that I feel one way or the other, honestly. But I did kind of want to poke into why American Christianity, and especially American Christians, are so, not everyone, not all of them, just in general, many of the vibe partakers sort of are the way they are, not even in a negative sense. The first real Christians I knew growing up were like so evangelical and non-denominational that they wouldn't even call themselves that. Like they didn't even know. Like I would ask them like, what kind of Christian are you? They'd be like, I'm just Christian. Nothing wrong with that, but just to give you an idea of the not being rooted in a historical flow of the religion. You can say that's good or bad. I mean, I kind of feel that way now, so I'm not saying it's bad. But I wanted to understand a little bit more. Is there going to be Patty's following? Yeah. Okay. That was perfect. Okay, so let's make some decisions. What time is it? It's 8:11. We have the perfect amount of time. You know, I thought we'd go in here and kind of like put some stuff in, but I actually really like that it's this like almost abstract, but still, we didn't get the exact Rolling Hills effect, but I kind of like it more with like the accidents and all this stuff going on over here. So I think we're gonna leave it. Maybe I could put in like a tree or something, but I'm almost just worried that I would mess up the like hyper scale that we have going on. And man, I really love that the red ended up like this. So perfect. Okay, so let's think about this. Things I definitely want to put in. We're coming back to the follower thing and stuff like that. The first people. You know, actually, when I was thinking about the follower, talking about Mormonism, I was thinking about Brigham Young, actually. I don't know if technically he would be the... He's not really one of the... I actually have no idea if he's one of the first followers or not, but he's the guy who like took over after Joseph Smith. And it was interesting because his dad... I didn't go too far into him, but his dad fought in the Revolutionary War. So it's kind of crazy because I was talking about last week how you feel like the 1800s is the second American century, but it's really the first American century. And it's just such a trip. Like, imagine your dad fought in the Revolutionary War, and then all of a sudden you're rolling all the way out to, like, you know, the Western Territory as part of this, like, new religion. It's like a lot of that stuff happened, like, boom, like right when the country started. It's almost like infused into the DNA of America as part of the spirituality that I've been thinking about in general. Not just Mormonism, but the general Christian trends in the widest possible sense. So I do want to get like a tiny white moon up here, but I'm going to wait until it's dry, because I want to put it in like super crisp, almost imperceptible. I'm kind of torn on the path thing. I mean, I feel like we kind of need it, right? But the whole, well, actually, I was going to say the whole thing about the follower and the first followers, which is really the symbolic theme that we're thinking about, is I was going to say that there is no path. They're the first followers. But actually, there is a path. It's just not very well trodden, because the first followers of a religion, whether they're, you know, the apostles following Christ, obviously, our worldview puts that in the most privileged position possible, but we could look at other followers of other religions too, is that there is a path. It's just the leader. It's the person who has started the religion. Obviously, we don't think Jesus is just a person, but, you know, I can't put an asterisk after every single word I say. But you know what I mean. There is a path for the first followers, but the path is not, it's not a highway. It's not a paved road. It's just a, you know what I'm saying. So I am going to throw in a path, but we'll make it like super light. We'll make it like a very light path. I'm going to come in with the huge brush. This brush has been getting a lot of play today. This is actually, if I wanted to refocus the camera, I would show you the writing on the handle. It says faux squirrel hair. This is meant to imitate squirrel hair, which was really popular during certain times and places. Yeah, it says petite gris imitation squirrel. Isn't that cool? So that's certain times and places. I think it was mostly in Northern Europe, but I couldn't really say. Faux squirrel was, not faux squirrel, they had real squirrel. Squirrel hair was one of the best brushes to make it. But, was one of the best hairs to make brushes out of. Sorry, I'm brain dead because it's hot here now. Okay, so let's see. I don't want it to be too dark, but I'm kind of just going to go for it. Perfect. But it's still too light. It's not actually perfect. You never really think about it, but different animal hairs and their suitability to make paintbrushes is something that painters have to think about. And it varies from place to place. Let's see. I'm going to kind of try and do a little bit of a complex maneuver here, because maybe I'll just do it this way. I feel like I tapered it a little bit too much. Can't decide if I like that fade. I actually kind of do like it. I kind of do like it. And then let's see, how do we want it to be expanding out? I'm just going to kind of go for it here. Perfect. Oh, dude, that was so perfect. Same deal here. We'll just kind of have the path almost like disappearing into the... oh, dude, so good. Perfect. Boom. This path's just like receding into the distance. That's solid. That is solid. Okay. Other things. Okay, so let's start wrapping this up. We're starting to land the plane right now. You know, I talked about putting in those luminous fruits, but the thing is that because of the way the painting is, obviously, if I put them in now, they're going to be like, oh, attention, look over here. So I kind of don't want to do that. I also don't want to make them normal fruits, because that would also attract too much attention. So I might just leave these like luminous spaces in the tree. You know, we know what it is. We kind of know it's a reference a little bit, but I kind of just like it how it is, honestly. Because if I start putting details in there, the fact that nothing else has any details anywhere, it's going to mess up the visual balance of the painting. And that green actually doesn't look good. So I'm just going to pick that right back up again. Let's leave it. Let's leave it how it is. I'm looking at it on the screen, so I'm seeing what you're seeing. I think it's good. I think it's good. Let's leave it how it is. But I don't necessarily like that he is totally all white with no filling. It just looks unconsidered. We talked about it last week, but that's a really good word to have in your art vocabulary. Unconsidered. It looks like it has not been properly addressed. So I'm just going to come in with this sort of nice tan color. We'll fill in his backpack. It's kind of fitting for first follower. First followers normally do have a little bit of a backpack. Let's see, is there anything else I wanted to make sure I hit in terms of my reading and stuff? Not really, man. I just want to make sure I don't, like, sometimes I wrap up the show and I'm like, oh, I forgot to talk about X. But not really. I am going to finish the Book of Mormon, honestly, just because it's so relevant to my interests. It's also interesting because it's a totally different manifestation of, like, ancient America stuff. I will talk about that in 1 second. But let's see. What color are we going to make his shirt? Should not have left that till the last choice. Because it's a huge call. And I really shouldn't have left it, but I did. And now whatever color I choose, I feel like that's really going to affect the picture. I'm imagining a few colors. I mean, part of me feels like I could port this like cornfieldy color over here. Nothing too loud. I was thinking even the rock color, but I don't want to do anything too crazy. But I think I could port over the cornfield color. Just like a normal tan shirt. It's not too crazy. It's not too loud. But it is yellow, so it will be attention grabbing. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do right now. And perfect. Oh yeah, so it's also cool because, so the other thing, and this is going to kind of naturally play out into the rest of the research that I do and kind of porting back into the whole vibe. Yeah, this is the perfect color. This is perfect. Brings them into the rest of the landscape. I'm going to dab it up a little bit so it's not so dark. But I don't know if other people know this. I already knew this because I'm always looking into like weird alternative archaeology stuff, but because Mormons have the Book of Mormon, they have a totally different set of archaeological presuppositions because in their view, you know, these people were literally living here in the ancient Americas. In like the first chapter of the Book of Mormon, they literally sail from Jerusalem over to the Americas, actually. It's kind of cool. And so they do literally like Mormon archaeology and start out with the assumption, obviously, that the Book of Mormon is true and then look for archaeological evidence of it. So it's interesting because back when I was into like ancient cultures and weird spins on ancient cultures and stuff, I actually got a lot of good information from them because they were looking at things from an angle that no one else was, obviously. So now it's interesting because I'm going through certain things and they kind of do that with everything. They're really big on like the Book of Enoch and a lot of the Apocrypha and stuff like that. And I know a lot of times when people hear the word Apocrypha, they think it's like Gnostic stuff, like, oh, pump the brakes. But the Book of Enoch is really cool, and I'm fairly certain it's actually mentioned in the Bible many times. So it's going to be kind of interesting. I don't know where I'm going after this in terms of looking at stuff, but I got a book from this guy named Hugh Nibley, who's this like Mormon ancient stuff professor who obviously starts from the presupposition of all this stuff being true, which means that he has a different lens than other people. So I'm kind of excited to look into all that, but I have a lot of reading to do before then. Okay. I'm going to throw in the moon. I'm going to throw it in right now. I just want to paint it in literally just the tiniest sliver. And I'm going to put it in right here. I don't know if the paint is still wet. I don't want to touch it because then if I touch it and it's still wet, that was a mistake. I'm actually toning down the blue a little bit. I'm making it so it's light blue just because if I make it perfectly white, it's going to sing out a little bit too much. It's going to be like too intense. I think that's the right color. I'm just going to come and put it right in here. And I want it to land perfect. Perfect! I want it to land right on the point where the moon would fade into the background also with that white. I literally nailed the exact perfect spot that I wanted to land it in. Wow, this is a really good one. This is really fun. I had a really good time making this with you guys right now. I think it's good. I'm kind of tempted to come in and like, you know, this spot's a little light and patch it up over here, but it was such a spontaneous process and things were just happening so quickly that I think I should just leave it. This is a classic watercolor moment that you're going to have if you ever use or do watercolors where it's set and you're like, oh, I feel like I could kind of just come in here, but you can't. You can't come back in. The mix is set, the record's pressed, and if you come back in, it's going to ruin the whole wetness effect. In fact, if you were talking about painting, what we did most of the time here is called wet into wet. You're painting wet into wet. And if you come back in with the dry on dry, that's what this is. Or I guess you can call it wet on dry. I don't actually know what the technical term would be. But it just sings out like a sore thumb. So I'm looking at this, man. I think that we're good. I think that we're good. Let me see if I have more questions. I'll look away for a second. It's also an art thing. I had a painting teacher who said, you know, you should be working on two things at once so you can look at one, look at the other, and not get visually set into one thing. Obviously, we don't do that here, but I'm going to look away for a second. We're gonna wrap up at our set time at 8:30. That's the set time. I just arbitrarily decided that one day. So let's see. Is there going to be a path forward? Yeah. Feelings on Orrin Porter Rockwell. I don't know who that is. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm brain blanking right now, but I don't know who that is. I gotta check him out. Other question. Ren asked, do you think that Mormons are Christian since they believe that God Was once a man and was exalted into godhood. Oh, such a good question to wrap it up on. Such a good question. Well, you know, it's interesting, man, because it's a really good question. It's really interesting because I read this whole thing that was called Speculation. What was it called? It's called Speculations of a Theoretical Mormon. And this guy wrote it. And he's not Mormon, or at least he wasn't when he wrote it. I don't know if he is now. I have no idea. And it was kind of interesting because I could tell that he was a little bit like me in the sense of like looking at theology and different branches of Christianity and sort of surveying Christendom as a whole and kind of being a little bit of a mystical weirdo. And he wrote this whole thing. I printed it out from my printer. It was like 60 to 80 pages maybe printed out. And he was kind of just like, I've been looking into Mormonism for a long time, but I'm not Mormon, and here's what I think. Here's what I kind of gathered up. These are just like random thoughts I had over the years of looking into it. And it was super interesting, man. It was one of the most interesting things I read in a long time. And it really like clarified a lot of things for me because, like I said, he's not coming at it from pro or con perspective. But I think that one thing it illuminated for me was that I'm not saying this is unjustified or justified. Maybe it's totally justified. Maybe it's totally unjustified. I'm just kind of neutrally looking at the pool that I'm, poking into at this moment. But I think it's like the bias against Mormons is so strong. Again, maybe it's justified. Maybe it's not. I'm not making like any ethical or judgmental claims here. I'm just observing the reality. It's like the bias against them is so strong that like even being neutral reads as a positive bias, if that makes sense. Like one interesting thing he said, I forget if I said this last week, but it's a crazy interesting ethnographic religious observation. He said the way that secular culture looks at Christianity, okay? So imagine the way that secular, let's say atheist culture looks at Christianity. He said that's the way that Christianity internally looks at Mormons, which I thought was crazy interesting, man. It like blew my mind. Again, like I'm not saying anyone's wrong or right, but it was a very interesting ethnographic observation because all the same stuff that secular culture says about Christianity, like, oh, those guys are crazy, it's a scam, it's, they just believe all the stuff in this crazy book, it's not even real. You could port all of that, and that's what Christianity says about Mormonism, let's say internally. You're asking me if it's internal or not, but let's just say it's internally. And again, like whether or not that's justified or, right or wrong, I thought that was just a really interesting observation, just such an excellent like semiotic ethnographic observation. As for the question of like, are Mormons Christian? Yeah, someone on Twitter asked me that. They were like, Mormons aren't Christian, dude. Like, I think I casually, just like in a tweet, mentioned it, totally again neutrally. And I think it's a really interesting question because I thought about it a lot. I thought, are Mormons Christian? And I was like, well, how would we determine that? I guess you have to ask, what is Christian? And you can't just say someone who follows Jesus because then Mormons would say, well, we follow Jesus, so we're Christian. So if you're making the claim that they're not Christian, there has to be something deeper there. And I thought of a little thought experiment that didn't really go the way I thought it would. I thought, well, let's do a thought experiment and say, well, what if someone said they were a follower of Jesus, but then after that, all the religious stuff and all the religious, posits and axioms and cosmology was just something wild, like 1,000% off the page. Would they still be Christian? That's a very interesting question. What if you met someone who's like, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, I'm Christian, and then you ask them about it and they were like, well, yeah, they wouldn't say this, but like I'm basically kind of like Hindu and Jesus is like the God that I chose to worship or something. So that's why I'm Christian. I believe in all this stuff, would that person be Christian? It's really difficult to answer. Or what if you met someone who was like, yeah, this is a better example. Met someone who's like, yeah, I'm Christian, I follow Jesus. I believe that Buddha enlightened the world to the reality of material existence, and I follow Jesus, who is the best example of, all this other stuff, so I'm a follower of Jesus, so I'm Christian. Would that person be Christian? That seems like a pretty obvious no, I guess, right? I don't know. It's really hard to find the line, though, because I think the normal default people go to is they say, well, the Nicene Creed. That's the most standard definition of Christianity. I believe in God the Father and, well, I haven't done the rosary in a few days, so I can't do it off the cuff. I believe in God the Father and his son, Jesus, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, died, was buried, rose 3 days later, and the Holy Spirit, and all that stuff. I think that most people would see that as like, oh, well, that's Christianity. Then you're Christian. But it's interesting because the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons and these other, I think, admittedly fringe groups, they're not mainstream Christianity for sure, say, well, where does it say that I have to believe in a certain creed to be Christian? And that's a very interesting rebuttal. It's like, well, I don't know. That's interesting. I think that where I landed on it personally at this moment is that I would say that there's mainstream Christianity, and Mormonism is obviously not mainstream Christianity, right? I mean, I think it would be a little disingenuous even if you are the most pro-Mormon person in the world. At this moment, I've only been looking at this for a little bit. This is just where I'm at right now. Maybe I'll totally change my mind. I think it would be a little disingenuous to be like, well, yeah, there's all these different Christian groups, and we're just like one of them. We're totally just one of these other Christian groups, right? I think that would be a little disingenuous, personally. I don't know if they feel that way, actually. I have no idea. So I think obviously they're not part of mainstream Christianity, but are they not Christian? I don't know. That would be pretty difficult for me to pin down and say for sure at this moment. I'm glad you asked me that, but that's my non-committal answer. That's kind of how I feel. It's hard for me. I'm thinking about it in general. I'm thinking about what the delineator is, and it's very difficult to pin down. It's very difficult to pin down. That's my answer. Okay. Missouri's warming to Mormons, lifting the Mormon extermination order in 1976. It's really funny. They still had that on. Time to finally lift the extermination order. Maybe we'll get that going. All right, so I'm going to move this palette so we can see exactly what we got going on here. I'm going to move this over. As usual, you got to clear the workspace a little bit so you can see. That's a cool look. I tore through my glove. So I'm going to move this paper too. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Man, that was a really cool one. That was a really good one. You know the deal, I always say at the end that I feel the need to recap, but you were just here the whole time, so why would I? But little notes here. It's interesting because I didn't get the effect that I thought I was going to, but I really like the effect that I got here. I thought I would get fading into lighter and lighter, like receding foggily into the distance. But instead I got, boom, turned up to 10. Even this is probably the most intense color in the whole picture. But I actually like it. It actually works. I think that I got the distance thing. This is a good picture note by virtue of clarity and focus rather than value. Value being how light or dark something is. What I expected was that in this picture, the value, things would get lighter and lighter and lighter as you receded into the distance. But actually, I got the distance effect via fuzziness, to use a colloquial term. He is 100% not fuzzy. The tree is not fuzzy. They are close. This is about as fuzzy as you could possibly get. Therefore, it's far away. So that's kind of how I got the distance thing there. Unexpectedly, I didn't really plan on that. The colors are sick. I didn't think this was going to happen, but really like that. And I actually really like the uneven horizon. It kind of confers a little bit of a weird energy, like the uneven, chaotic horizon out there. And yeah, I think this is a really good one. I got the moon going on over here. I wanted the moon because the followers, this is a good wrap up. The whole theme basically was the archetype of the first followers, the followers of a religion, the first group to be the followers, and I thought a little reference to night would be good because you don't know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? You have no idea what the future is. You're kind of stepping into this unknown situation, but at the same time, there is a path. You're following someone. So this one worked really, really, really well. It's a really good one. Thanks for hanging out for this one. Any other questions? No, not really. Someone said they changed their name to LDS to emphasize that they're Christian. Yeah, they did do that. I think that's true. All right. Boom. Right on time. It's 8:32. Thanks for coming through. Thanks for hanging out. Really enjoyed doing this with you guys. We're getting better. Honestly, I don't want to jinx it, but the paintings are getting better, man. They're getting good. We had a really good streak, which means I'll probably mess it up next week now that I jinxed it, but they're getting good, man. So we'll see what happens over the next week. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into my studies. We'll regroup and see what's going on. And that's the show. Thanks for coming through. Thanks for doing the spiritual work that we're all doing together. But now you know the deal. We're going back to the chessboard, spiritual warfare, and I will see you guys on the internet where we all hang out together. Thanks for coming through.